What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Another video means another dopamine high because of the buy something that feels something. And today we're back at it with another review. For today's review, we are taking a look at NECA's Xenomorph XX121 from Alien Romulus. Now, this is a really interesting figure to come from NECA because in Alien Romulus, we all remember the scorched alien that was like, you know, the big bad alien of that movie. But Xenomorph XX121 wasn't really mentioned, or at least the name wasn't, but is in the film. Now, not as we see here for the figure, this is a full-fledged Xenomorph figure, whereas in the movie, this is actually the alien that we see in the very beginning with that catacomb, and then later on see dangling from the ceiling, which also means that this is actually Big Chap. I guess this is like the scientific or the more official name for Big Chap, but Big Chap is how I remember the alien from the first Alien movie, so that's how I'm going to be addressing Xenomorph XX121 throughout most of this video probably. This actually isn't the first time that we've seen Xenomorph XX121 in the Alien Romulus wave. The first time was actually in that accessory set that paired with the release of the Scorched Alien, and it's when Xenomorph XX121 is in that fossilized state in the asteroid, which was pretty neat to see. And we actually have another release that came out shortly after the announcement of this figure, which was with the Deluxe Suspended Lab Xenomorph XX121, which is more of a display piece than an actual figure. But it's cool to see that we have pretty much all these variations of Xenomorph XX121. But one last piece of unfortunate but still neat nonetheless information about this figure. If you have seen Alien Romulus, the only times that we see XX121 is either in the fossilized state or when they're dead and suspended from the lab ceiling, but never alive or in one piece like this figure shows us. And that's because in Alien Romulus we were actually supposed to get a scene with XX121, waking up from the fossilized asteroid and wreaking havoc like they did in Alien, but that was deleted and is kind of unfortunate because it would have been really cool to see Big Chap go at it for one last time. But deleted scene or not, it is really cool to get another Xenomorph figure because I love Alien and I love what NECA does with the Alien franchise. And at any point during or after the video you do realize you want to pick up this figure for yourself, you can go straight to the NECA store and pick up this figure for $39.99. But for whatever reason you don't want to and you want to spend more money on this figure, you can go to Entertainment Earth or the Big Bad Toy Store and spend a whopping $45.99. Now, these are the only three places I was able to find this figure for sale, which is really weird to think about because I could remember when I could always count on Target or Walmart at some times to have these figures, but it seems like the times are changing. But anyways, link in the description of the video if you want to go to one of these three spots to pick up your Xenomorph XX121. And I think I've done enough explaining and just overall yapping about this figure, so let's move on to the next segment and take a look at the packaging for Xenomorph XX121. So taking a look at the packaging, we have the Romulus poster, which is really nice for the front, and then we have the title of the figure on the bottom. And then going over to the side of the packaging, we have a nice portrait of XX121 with the title of the figure on the bottom yet again. And then going to the other side of the packaging, we have another portrait of XX121 with their title on the bottom. And then moving over to the back of the packaging, we have multiple photos of the figure and some of the accessories included, which is very nice. It's always nice to know what we're getting. And then moving to the bottom, we have a brief description of what's going on with our figure, and then a little thing that goes over what's included with the packaging, which is really nice. And then after that, we can open up the front of the packaging to get another photo of our figure. And then obviously we have the figure itself with everything included, and it looks like everything is in the packaging, which is what we want to see. And one closing comment for this segment, I really like this packaging more than the packaging for the Scorched Alien. I don't know what NECA was thinking. I really like this box design better. So right out of the box, unsurprisingly, I can confirm that XX121 is an amazing looking figure. NECA always delivers when it comes to visual presentation, and these Xenomorphs from NECA are no exception. And starting off by appreciating the level of sculpt work on this figure. Xenomorphs are covered in head to toe with just so much detail, and whether that's due to the cylindrical or abstract shape of their heads to the rigid structure of their bodies covered in just bone-like and carapace protrusions. And of course we can't forget that tail, that skeletal whip of a tail that is just covered in head to toe with just so much detail and line work. There's just so much to appreciate about this figure that if I were to go over every little thing, this segment would be way longer than it needs to. There's one really gnarly detail on this figure that I'm just not gonna glance over, and that is the skull. I really just love how you can see XX121 skull through the carapace, and it's just sculpted so beautifully, and the paintwork on it just, you know, works so well with it, which obviously I will talk about the overall paintwork on this figure, but just I have to just talk about it now, just how amazing the skull looks through the carapace on this figure. I just feel like NECA went above and beyond with this figure's visuals. So now segueing over to the paintwork on this figure, I think it is absolutely amazing what NECA did here. For the most part, XX121 is just all black, and typically when a character, or a figure I should say, is all just one color, lots of details tend to get lost in, you know, just the flatness of the figure. But NECA went over this figure with some silver and really allowed for all the details on this figure to really pop, which is great because, like I said, there's tons of detail on this figure, and I know it is part of the Xenomorph design to have some of these silver highlights, but I just think that NECA did such a great job with the application of the silver here. And obviously silver is used in other places on this figure, such as the teeth and then the nails on the hands and feet. And like I mentioned earlier, the paintwork for the skull is just phenomenal. The use of the silver and the black with the transparent carapace just looks phenomenal, and I think this is the most prominent transparent carapace skull that we have on a Xenomorph. I might be wrong, but at least in my collection, this is the most prominent it's ever been, and it just looks phenomenal. So with all that said, I guess you could say I like how this figure looks, but unsurprisingly, NECA did a great job. They always do, and it just seems like this is probably one of the best looking Xenomorph figures that we have so far, or well, at least in my opinion. And because I want to give this video some extra meat, some extra content, I want to compare this figure to the Big Chap figure because they are the same Xenomorph, and when you have them next to each other, you can tell that Big Chap is a lot more robust, he's a lot more stocky, and that does make sense seeing that Big Chap, when they were filming Alien, was a dude in a suit, whereas Xenomorph XX121 would have been mostly practical effects and CGI. So it's really cool to see how the evolution of props and practical effects affects the design of a character, I guess. But I also think that Alien Romulus still did a great job at respecting the original design of Big Chap while still having their own twist that matches the aesthetic of the movie. And then here we have XX121 next to the Scorched Alien, who also appeared in Alien Romulus, and I didn't realize how much taller the Scorched Alien was going to be, but obviously we can tell that the absolute unit that is the Scorched Alien strays away from the more human design that XX121 has, and the Scorched Alien obviously looks more foreign, more alien if you would, and, you know, resembles more of what the new aged Xenomorphs look like. But at the end of the day, I think it's really cool to see the evolution of the Xenomorph design when we compare a, well, I mean, technically this is a new design for Big Chap, but it's obviously based off of the design from Alien. So in a way, it's really cool to see the comparison of the old Xenomorph design and the new one, to just see how far that they've come in the franchise. So starting off articulation in the head region, you cannot rotate his head 360 degrees, but you can still get some movement nonetheless. And it is probably for the best that we don't try and rotate XX121's head 360 degrees because of the tubing on the sides, because they would obviously rip if the head was to rotate that far. But we can get the head to look up and down a decent amount, and we can also get some good range when it comes to swaying XX121's head side to side. And then of course you can open and close the mouth with no issues. And then we have the second mouth, which can move back and forth with no issues. And then moving over to the arms, we can rotate the arms up and over 360 degrees. And then when it comes to lifting the arm in this position, we can get some decent range, and we get just about about the same amount of range when we flip that arm 180 degrees. And then going down the arm, we can rotate the forearm 360 degrees. And then when it comes to the elbow bend on XX121, we get some decent range here. And then of course with the hands, we can rotate them 360 degrees and bend the wrist however we please. And oddly enough, there is no 360 degree rotation for the torso on this figure, which is strange because I'm so used to seeing that level of range on this figure, but I guess there is some, so it is better than none, I guess. But we can have the torso move back and forth, which is always nice to see. And we can move the torso side to side as well. And then moving down to the legs, we can rotate the legs 360 degrees. And right at the waist area, we can pivot the thighs for extra range. And then when it comes to the splittage for XX121, we get amazing splittage, almost a full complete split, which is really nice to see. And then when it comes to the knee bend on our figure, the range is phenomenal. You can get a full butt kick out of this figure. And then when it comes to the feet, we can obviously rotate them 360 degrees and bend the wrist however we please. And then we can also move the toes up and down for better balancing of this figure. So this is footage of me not being able to rotate the tail 360 degrees, but turns out while fidgeting with this figure you can, so you can rotate the tail 360 degrees, which is nice. And obviously for the tail, there is a wire that allows us to manipulate the tail and position it however we want. And honestly, this is probably the best feeling tail that I've ever had out of all my Xenomorph figures. Whatever that NECA did for this tail, I hope they do with all tails moving forward. There's no resistance, no give. It doesn't feel like it's gonna break. It's just great. So overall, I'm very happy with the articulation on this figure, but one issue that I did have is the balancing. Now, there are multiple points of articulation in the legs and all the range feels great, but for some reason XX121 just does not want to stand up. So throughout the video I had to use my NECA stands to keep this figure from falling over, and even then he would still find a way to fall over. So I would use these stands on top of my NECA dynamic stand, which is very useful for a lot of figures that I review on this channel. But it's just kind of a bummer that this figure has an issue standing up, or at least standing up on its own. And it might not be a great stand, but the Scorched Alien came with this stand that did help every now and then throughout that video, and it is appreciated just to see that they did give us something to help try and display our figure. So something like this or something similar to the dynamic stand might have been nice for this figure. So for our first bunch of accessories, we do get a bunch of swappable hands with XX121. He comes with an additional 3 pairs of hands, giving us a total of 4 pairs of hands for our figure. So obviously starting off, we do have the default hands, which are pretty neutral. And then for the next pair of hands, we have these slightly curved hands that are a bit more expressive than the default ones. And then for our third pair, we have these even more curved hands that are more expressive and allow for more dynamic action poses. And then for the last pair of hands, we have these curled / holding hands that allow you to have XX121 look like they're crawling on the ground or just holding a victim. And though I'm still not fully used to getting a bunch of swappable hands with my Xenomorph figure, I do think it is an acceptable compromise to not getting a facehugger egg. And then for our next accessory, we do get a facehugger, and this is the same facehugger that we got with the Scorched Alien. So if you have the Scorched Alien, you know what to expect from this facehugger. And as always, NECA does a great job with the visuals. I love the scales that go down the back all the way to the tail, to the bone-like legs, and even the fleshy bits on the other side that look like something else. And obviously the paint job is great as well. I really love the dark tones that Alien Romulus has given the facehugger. It's something new and fresh, and it just looks great on this accessory. And then obviously the fleshy bits look even worse with the pink that they went with for this accessory. But overall, very happy with NECA's execution of this facehugger. And of course, there is a small wire in the tail, so if you want to manipulate it somewhat, I will say somewhat, because you don't obviously want to break off the tail, you can do so. And it's just a nice little touch that they've always added to the facehuggers, and I hope they don't stop doing it. And then for the next pair of accessories, we get 2 chest bursters in 2 different positions. The first one is in more of a forward position, position as if he was shooting forward or swimming forward. It's terrible to say that because they look like sperm cells, but yeah, he's moving forward. He's going where he needs to go. And then the second one is in the classic upright position that we're used to getting our chest bursters in from NECA. But overall, I think visually these guys look good for how small they are. They're jam-packed with detail, from the scales going down the tail to the carapace skull to just the jawline, the little teeth, or the little arms that they got. Just no matter where you look on these two little guys, there's just detail to be found and appreciated. And just like the face hugger, there is a little wire in their tail that you can move around somewhat and allow you to, you know, display them for photography or just be a little more vibrant on your shelf. And here we are at the turntable segment of the video, pretty much where I go over what I like, dislike, pros, cons, strengths, and weaknesses. Just give my general thoughts and opinions out on the figure at hand, which is Xenomorph XX121 in this case. And in this segment, I typically start off with the negatives just to get the sour stuff out of the way, because I don't like dwelling on the negative any longer than I already have to. And fortunately, there isn't that much I dislike about this figure. I mean, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives for XX121, but there are two things that do come to mind when it comes to this figure that kind of bug me. The first one being the lack of rotation in the torso. I mean, I am grateful that we can have the torso sway side to side and back and forth, but it would have been nice to have some level of rotation, even if it wasn't a full 360-degree rotation. And then secondly is the balancing issues that I did have with XX121. Now, it's not to say that you can't balance XX121 without a stand. It is very much possible, but more times than not, this figure will fall over. So you could easily fix this with purchasing a stand, but I feel like it would have been nicer if NECA included a stand like they did with the Scorched Alien. And then swaying over to the positives, and by God, is there a lot to love about this figure. Starting off with the visuals, I mean, jam-packed with details for starters. Just so much going on with this design, and NECA was sure to get down every little thing that they could, and the paint application just complements all the little details and sculpt work that NECA put into this figure. And then obviously there's the articulation. Now, 95% of this figure feels great. The head area is fine, the arms are fine, the legs are fine, the tail is the best feeling tail I think I've ever had on a Xenomorph figure. And then going back to the torso, at least the range when you sway the torso side to side and back and forth is good, so there is some decent range in the torso. I just wish we could get that rotation still. And the accessories that come in this figure are plentiful. We get a bunch of swappable hands, 2 chest bursters, and a face hugger, and I'm pretty sure they gave us a bunch of swappable hands to make up for the lack of egg, because usually in an ultimate set for a Xenomorph you get a face hugger, a chest burster, and an egg, but in Romulus we didn't see any eggs, so it wouldn't really make sense to give this figure from Romulus an egg. But overall, I think that this was a solid figure made by NECA. There's just so much going on and so much to love. I think that this is probably one of the best Xenomorph figures that they've made in recent years. And I don't think I need to say this, but I do highly recommend picking up Xenomorph XX121 by NECA. Just such an amazing figure with so much to appreciate. And if you at any point do want to pick up this figure for yourself, I do have links in the description of the video to go do so, at least online. And if you did enjoy today's video, a like and a subscription would be greatly appreciated. And if you comment on today's video, bouncing off anything that I did say, just giving your general thoughts and opinions on Xenomorph XX121, I most likely will reply, because I love talking about this stuff if you haven't caught on already. And don't worry about the bell, because we both know that shit is broken. And if you want to see more alien content by yours truly, I already have a handful of videos already on the channel for you to watch, and feel free to go check out. And if you enjoy franchises such as Predator or Halo or Star Wars or Warhammer, I have, videos covering those franchises as well. So again, feel free to go check those out. And with all that said, please have a great day and stay hydrated, because it's very important.